All right, we are back with a super special episode of App Stories this week that's sponsored by Collide, Things, and SourceGraph. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Fetici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I mean, today is the culmination of what's really been about 6 months of work on and off.
Yeah.
So it's we're recording this a little bit in advance of announcing, but only a day in advance of announcing Automation April. So we're here today to talk a little bit about what Automation April is all about, because it's a brand new Mac Stories special event. And we're going to talk about some shortcut stuff too. Towards the end of the show. But I want to kick it off by just kind of letting everybody know what we're up to, because there's an awful lot happening here.
Yeah.
And it all started with the post that you wrote last Friday, which kind of gives a broad overview of it without giving away too much, because, one of the things we have going on, which is a contest. It's a shortcuts contest, which we'll get into the details a little bit more in a second.
Let's start from the very beginning, right? So what is Automation April, and why are we doing this? You're jumping far ahead into the details, John, and I know that you want to talk about the details, but first let's provide people with a broad picture, all right? So we got together last November, me and you, and we started thinking about what can we do in terms of special events, right, on Mac Stories? Because we love organizing these special events, and we love coming up with these ideas to sort of set a schedule in our year so that we can do special things even when other stuff is, when no Apple news are happening, basically. And so we started thinking, and I think you came up with the idea, or maybe I did, or maybe we came up with the idea together of why don't we do something special about shortcuts and automation? And so we started planning this event, and as we talked about it in person, and over the course of 6 months, we refined the idea and we really understood what we were going for. We realized we wanted to do this special event, Automation April, which is a month long, so a whole month, all about automation on Apple platforms. And when we say all about, we mean a variety of things, because that's the key of Automation April, I think, that people really need to understand. I used this expression that I don't know if you noticed, John. I know that Mike did, and it pointed out that expression to me. And it was everything that I write is always intentional, right? That I use the expression, the extended Mac Stories universe, in the story.
Right.
So the idea is that we wanted to do the special event all about shortcuts and automation by taking advantage of every single Mac Stories property we have. Because Mac Stories, I guess if you're listening to App Stories, maybe you realized Mac Stories is no longer just macstories.net, the Apple blog. We're doing a lot. We've been expanding, and we're doing a lot of things now. We have Mac Stories, we have the club, we have multiple tiers of the club. We have App Stories, which comes in two versions. There's a regular version and the membership version. And we have a Discord community. Plus, we know a lot of developers, thankfully. We work with a lot of them in terms of app coverage, in terms of, we provide feedback and we come up with feature requests. But we also we're really, really fortunate to have thousands and, hundreds of thousands of readers, many of them that come up with these incredible ideas for shortcuts and automations, especially now that shortcuts is on all Apple devices. So the key thing to understand, and now, John, I'm sorry for the interruption. I'll let you go on with the details. But I think the thing that I really wanted to state up front that I think is extremely important, that Automation April is the kind of event that I don't want to say that only Mac Stories can do, but I think it really plays to our strengths, which means we can tap and we can optimize for every single, platform that we have, whether it's articles on Mac Stories or extended articles and shortcuts for the club or the Discord community or the podcast. All these things coming together with a special extra, which is the contest. And now, John, sorry, I just wanted to really drive home this point because I'm really proud of all the work and the planning that you and I have done to make this happen.
Yes, I am too. I'm not sure I want to talk about the details now, Federico, after being so rudely interrupted.
I'm sorry. I am so excited. And look, I'm trying to use all the little energy that I have left for the most important points.
I know, no, and you are absolutely right. It is important to kind of understand why we're doing this and what the whole idea is behind it. And I would just echo that. That is a big part of what you and I have been trying to do with Mac Stories over the last few years, which is to take the things that we have grown over those years and bring them together into a unified whole, which is something that is a theme that you'll see more of throughout 2022 as we roll out other secret projects that we're always, at this point, I think, our entire lives are one big secret project, Federico. But
when everything is secret, is anything secret?
I don't know. Well, at least everything that we're speaking about right now is no longer a secret, because this did start back in November, and it did start with just some very vague ideas that by the time I left Rome, I think we had a pretty good sketch outline of what we were going to do. And so let me just explain a little bit of what we're going to do. The first thing, and one of the centerpieces of the entire month, is the Automation April Shortcuts Contest, where readers of Mac Stories can submit 2 shortcuts for consideration by our panel of judges. We have recruited a team of expert shortcuts users and creators who are going to help us judge these shortcuts in a number of different categories. We've got a post that's going up on Mac Stories the same day that the show is going out, a little later in the morning, that'll explain all of the details. But from April 4th through April 20th, we'll be accepting submissions, at least 2 from each person, up to 2, who want to submit a shortcut, and then we'll be judging them. And we've got some really cool prizes for people who are participating in this, including an Analog Pocket, which is the handheld game console by the Analog company that plays Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color games, as well as some other cartridges, and a Stream Deck XL, because anybody who's using shortcuts ought to be using a Stream Deck, and the XL is the kind of the premium model. It's the one with the most buttons, so you can cram in a lot of shortcuts with that thing. And our judges, we have a great panel of judges. We've got, of course, the Mac Stories team, Federico, Alex, and me. But we've also got Rosemary Orchard, David Sparks, Alex Cox, Chris Lawley, Matthew Casanelli, and Simon Stovring.
Yeah, so this is like the Shortcuts Hall of Fame, really.
It is. It's kind of the dream team, as we would call it.
It's like one of those super bands, like when the guitar player
super group.
It's a super group.
It's like Asia back in the 70s. You wouldn't even know what Asia is, probably.
What? Asia, the continent?
Yeah, Asia, the band. You should look it up. It's terrible music.
Wow, thanks. I will then. Okay.
This group is much better. In any event, that's really one of the centerpieces of what we're doing this month. Yep. But of course, there's a whole lot more than that, because Federico and I have been working on various shortcuts. Federico actually has a ton of shortcuts, because you resurrected a bunch of old shortcuts as well as and created some new ones that you for some reason hadn't shared in the past.
Yes.
And have updated, refined, and gotten them ready for the public. And you'll be releasing those over the course of the month.
Yes.
I've also been experimenting with a bunch of shortcuts, many of them Mac related, but also with an iOS angle as well. And then this show here, App Stories, we'll be doing things here. We're going to have special episodes. We're going to have interviews, lots of stuff going on there. And then on the club, we're doing a ton of giveaways. I've been doing email all week, Federico. I've been on email with a bunch of developers who are all really excited about Automation April, and they have been generous and kind enough to share with us coupon codes and discount codes and freebies that we can give away both in Club Mac Stories and the Mac Stories weekly newsletter, as well as we're doing a brand new thing, which is some Discord giveaways.
Yes.
So if you're a Club Mac Stories Plus or Club Premier member and have not signed up for Discord yet, now is the time to do that, because we have some really great giveaways going on there as well.
And a nice system for entering those giveaways that is all custom, and Alex worked this magic, and it's gonna be very nice.
Right. And of course, we're also going to be doing special stories in Mac Stories Weekly as part of this as well. And so this is going to go from April 1st. Well, your announcement on April 1st, but I think the real kickoff is April 4th, Monday, when this show comes out, because this show is coming out and the contest begins. And we're going to go all the way to the end of the month. This episode of App Stories and all of Automation April is brought to you by Collide. Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable. Instead of frustrating your employees, Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems. Visit collide.com/appstories to sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Enter your email when prompted to receive a free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. Collide knows that end users are IT admins' most significant untapped resource and key to solving the most challenging to fix security issues, including instructing developers to set passphrases on encrypted SSH keys, finding plain text two-factor backup codes and teaching end users how to store them securely, convincing employees to uninstall evil browser extensions that may sell their browser history, and more. Those are just some of the use cases not solved by locking down devices. You can try Collide with all of its features on a limited number of devices for free for 14 days, no credit card required. Try it out at collide.com/appstories. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show.
Let me add just one quick thing about the community aspect of automation.
Sure.
Because I also really care about this. I really feel like it's in the spirit of user automation. The very idea of taking something, learning from the techniques that someone else used, remixing that, and learning by doing is very much in the spirit of automation, very much in the spirit of programming, even very much in the spirit of shortcuts. And we've seen the creativity and the collaboration of the shortcuts community. We've seen it on Twitter, we've seen it on Reddit, we've seen it in a bunch of places, and we are trying to build a community around the Automation April. And we're going to use our Discord to make this happen, or to at least try and make this happen. So we're doing a couple of things that I want to point out. In the Discord, there's going to be a dedicated channel for Automation April. And the idea is that people can hang out there. They can talk about the shortcuts that they have submitted. And they don't have to be secret, right? Because your shortcut is tied to your identity. John is going to have the details as to how and where you can submit those shortcuts. But once you've submitted the shortcut and it's out there, we know that you made it and you can talk about it. You can say, hey, here's my entry for the contest. And maybe that will inspire others. Maybe that, you can have a discussion with other people. Maybe other people will help you improve the shortcut. Because yes, you can submit the shortcut, but you can also edit. So if you wanna perform some fixes, if you wanna add some features, that's the idea, right? To have an exchange with the community that maybe can help you, optimize a few things and come up with new ideas. So those conversations, I think, will be useful. In addition to that channel, we'll also try and do something that we haven't done before, which I've called a town hall workshop. So we're going to do a couple of those in the month of April in Discord. And the idea is that John and I will get together and probably going to try and have some guests on as well. And we're going to talk about high-level shortcuts, ideas, and concepts for designing shortcuts, optimizing shortcuts, in how you can try and achieve the qualities that we're looking for in a shortcut that we at the McStories team and the panel of judges will be evaluating. But we'll also be, personally, I want to talk about the specifics, like the nitty-gritty of some shortcuts that I'm putting together, because again, learning by doing. So that's the idea. I'm going to have a town hall workshop where people can ask questions. We're going to talk about high-level techniques. I'm going to talk about the shortcuts that I'm building, like how do I deal with, I don't know, bugs that I may run into shortcuts, which is a very common issue, especially
Right.
with this release. So we're going to do that as well. And yes, the idea is that we're going to bring everything together. So no matter, essentially, the way to sum it up is, no matter the way that you enjoy Mac Stories, whether you read articles or you like Mac Stories Weekly, or you listen to App Stories, or you're a club member, but whether you're a club member or you just have the newsletter, or maybe you hang out in the Discord, there's going to be something for everyone. And then there's going to be the contest. But I feel like the contest, of course, is going to be the most fun, and like people will compete for the prizes and all that. But it also should serve as an opportunity for people to get together and share their knowledge and their love for automation. And that's our goal. And if I gotta be honest, we want Automation April to become an annual thing. We want this to become like a new tradition. Like we are making up. We are creating our own new tradition. We want this to become an annual thing. And, judging by how, early signs are telling us, it seems like it's going to be pretty successful for us. I really like how we organized the whole thing and the kind of response we've gotten from developers and judges and a few people who knew in advance. So we want to do this again. And we want to do this every April. So I hope you like what we've prepared, and I cannot wait to see what people create and share with us.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that too. And yeah, I think it bears emphasizing that we want this to be an inclusive event that really draws on the expertise and of Shortcuts users who, whether you're a diehard Mac Stories reader or you're hanging out on the Reddit or however you satisfy and scratch that Shortcuts itch in your life, we'd love to have you be part of Shortcuts April. So hopefully you're listening to the show or you're reading the site and you find out about it some way. I'm sure this will show up on the Reddit at some point, and we're hoping that we get a really broad cross section of folks participating. And there'll be a post on macstories.net that I wrote that goes into the details about what the rules are and who the judges are and all those sorts of things. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Things from Cultured Code. If you want to achieve a goal, you've got to have a plan. And when it comes to making a plan, there's no better tool than the award-winning Things app. The idea behind Things is simple. Create a project for each of your goals. Add the steps to reach those goals. Schedule when you want to work on them. Each morning when you wake up, Things has already prepared your list of to-dos for the day. Just spend a few minutes reviewing the list, put your to-dos in the order you plan to work on them, and get on with your day. It doesn't matter which device you're on. Your to-dos sync through iCloud, so they're always with you, on your computer, in your pocket, and on your wrist. You can also connect your calendars to see your events, schedule to-dos that automatically repeat, write notes with Markdown, and much, much more. But when it comes to Things, what you'll love more than any other feature is the app's design. It doesn't just look good, it feels good to use. This is a native app made with a very high standard of quality, and it's a 2-time winner of the Apple Design Award. So, if you haven't tried Things yet, go check out the latest version. Head over to thingsapp.com. Again, that's thingsapp.com. Learn about all the great features in Things. Download a free trial for your Mac, and you can also find it on the App Store just by searching for Things. Whatever it is you want to accomplish in life, Things can help you get there. Try Things today at thingsapp.com. You won't regret it. Our thanks to Things for their support of the show. All right, Federico, what else should we talk about today?
Well, in the spirit of Automation April, and in the spirit of, having to prepare for Automation April, I thought it could be funny and interesting to talk about our shortcut setups, like it's sort of like a meta segment about how we organize shortcuts, because I feel like we have different approaches to how we tackle this, and I have personally changed how I run and organize my shortcuts. And like by organization, I mean like the folders we use, how we organize shortcuts, how we organize shortcuts that we use on a daily basis and that we consider finished versus the ones that are still a work in progress, like all those kinds of things, like sort of this meta episode. I believe one of our moderators on Discord, Lachlan, suggested this topic many, many months ago, and this feels like a perfect opportunity to finally talk about it.
Yeah, it really did. And I got to say, I'm not super satisfied with the way I have mine organized. So maybe I can steal some ideas from you, but maybe I should, I guess, give you some ideas as to how I'm doing this. I mean, I think probably the thing that I'm doing now that I like the most is I created an experiments folder in Shortcuts. Because one of the things I found that I was doing that was really making a mess of my shortcuts was that I'd have an idea and I'd start tinkering around with it in Shortcuts. And maybe, it was just 4 or 5 or 6 actions just to see conceptually whether something I was thinking about worked or not. And a lot of times I'd leave that there thinking, I'll come back to this and work on it some more. But if I did that 4, 5, 6 times in a row, all of a sudden I have all these partially built shortcuts that I would go back to and think, oh, I don't know what this was for. What was I thinking about with this? And then I wouldn't get rid of them because I thought, well, maybe this is important. Maybe this is an important idea. And then it would just become a cluttered mess. So I created an experiments folder is one of the very simple things I did that has made a big difference. And mine's got a lot in it right now. It's got nearly 50 shortcuts in it. In preparation for today too, Federico, I'll tell you, I went through and I did kind of clean up my shortcuts library quite a bit and deleted over 100 shortcuts because I just had a lot of cruft in there. But the thing about the experiments folder that I think supplements it and works really well is that I've started leaving notes for myself, little breadcrumbs about what these experiments are about. And so I just throw a comment into Shortcuts a lot of times where, I'm working on something and maybe I get partway through, but something interrupts me. Something's going on. I have to deal with something else and I have to abandon it. So I'll just do a quick comment that explains kind of where I was at, what I was thinking, and what I want to do next. And then that way, even if I don't get to that thing again for many days, I can go back and I'll know, it'll either be one of those situations where it's no longer relevant because I had that idea in my head and I incorporated it into a different shortcut, or it's something where I can just pick up where I left off and keep experimenting. So those two things together, I think, are a nice way of keeping kind of the work in process mess out of your main all shortcuts, view. Mm-hmm. I know you do something similar, right?
Yes. So it's first of all, it's really good practice in general to leave comments in your shortcuts to explain what you're doing, what you're thinking, because that's also like common practice in programming to comment out your code and add explanations for future you. And I cannot even begin to tell you how many times I was grateful to past me for leaving those comments and explaining, hey, you're doing this to work around this other issue, or maybe because you didn't have time to design a feature or something. So that's just good advice in general. I have a work in progress folder that I keep in Shortcuts, and that's full, and I'm looking right now. It's got 11 shortcuts right now. And these are all shortcuts that I'm working on and off. The ones that I'm working on the most, I guess, are the ones toward the top of the folder. But yeah, this is where I keep all of my, things that I'm working on right now that I still haven't decided where they're gonna go. I guess I work in stages here. It's sort of like a Jira setup, kind of. So once something graduates from the work in progress folder, it usually means that the shortcut is functionally done. By functionally done, I mean that it's missing the nice touches or like the best practices. For example, I consider a shortcut functionally done when the main functionality works, but it's missing, comments, it's missing detailed descriptions, it's missing the proper labels in menus, because when I design shortcuts, I just want to get to the point. I just want to understand if the core functionality is possible. So, but when it's done from the work in progress folder, I have 2 different folders. One is called New for Archive, and the other is called New for Members. So New for Archive means these are shortcuts that are going for free on the Mac Story Shortcuts Archive, which means usually there's an article associated with it. And if it goes in the new for members, it means it's a club shortcut, right? So it either goes in the in Automation Academy for Plus and Premier members, or it goes in Mac Stories Weekly for all club members. So from there, once the shortcuts are in those folders, it's just a matter of final polish and refinements, adding descriptions, making sure that I have all of the conditional blocks and error checking routines plugged in. The final polish to make sure that it's gonna work and be as reliable as possible for as many people as possible. So this is how I organize the shortcuts that I'm working on as a creator.
I do something similar in that I don't have two folders like that, but I do have one that's called Shortcuts for Stories, which really is once it works and once I know it's something that's shareable, I will graduate it to that folder and do like you do and kind of finish it off. And that way that's usually a pretty limited folder. There's not a lot in there at any one time. And that way I know this is something that I'm actually in the process of writing a story for, whether it's for the club or for Mac Stories.
Yeah. And I've been really liking this system, mostly because I try to avoid having shortcuts in the all shortcuts view. That's something you'll notice about my setup, is that the all shortcuts view, the default one, doesn't have any shortcuts at the top.
Mine doesn't either anymore.
Nice.
I cleaned it up really well this morning.
So how did you do it?
So I just went through from the very top of the all shortcuts view, and I went through, and a lot of things, I deleted anything that I have not used in a long time, especially if it was something that I knew I could get again very easily from the Mac Stories Shortcuts archive or the club or something like that, because those I can always grab again. So I deleted a lot of ones that I'm not using. I deleted anything that was like one of those half thoughts that didn't make its way into the experiments folder. And then I moved things into a number of different folders. I have my folders kind of split up between a couple of different ways. One is somewhat project oriented in that I have shortcuts that I use for publishing stories on Mac Stories and ones that I use for creating the newsletters for Club Mac Stories. And those are shortcuts that I use all the time for all sorts of things. Then I have kind of a weird combination of types of shortcuts. Like I have a utilities folder, which has a lot of very short shortcuts in it that I can do things like, I don't know, grab a date in a specific format or or find a link off an RSS feed or something like that. And then I have, as I said, the experiments folder. I've got some that are related to podcasts and others that are related to particular projects that I'm working on, like the Monterey review last fall. When I had some shortcuts in that review, I have a folder just for those, and I'll probably do that again this year. So it's a little bit of a mixture. That's one spot where I'm not super happy with it because I've still got way too many folders, and I just haven't had time to really do that. I guess there are a couple that are app oriented. There's an Obsidian one because I have an awful lot of Obsidian shortcuts. There's a Timery one because I have an awful lot of those as well. I've got a Tot one because I've been experimenting with the new Tot shortcut actions. And finally, I also have one for widgets because it's just easy to have a dedicated folder for widgets to have on my home screen on my iPad. So that's kind of it, I guess.
Very nice. Very nice. So when you went through the process of cleaning up those shortcuts,
yep,
did you end up rediscovering things that you had forgotten about? Because that happened to me. Like, oh yeah, I guess I did build this thing, and I never. So how did you manage that?
So some of those actually ended up going back into the experiments folder because I took a quick look at them. Right, I took a quick look at them and thought, oh, I remember making this, and I haven't really used it very much. And I wonder why I haven't been using it very much. Maybe it needs to be refined a little bit and thought about a little bit more. So I dumped it back into experiments where I'll have a chance to work on it a little more. Or some of those might have, I think few of those also ended up in utilities, where it's like the utilities folder to me is anything that's just a little bit of functionality that makes my life easier. And that way I can kind of dive into that one periodically, rediscover things, and start doing things like connecting them up to the Stream Deck or to Raycast or whatever, so that they're more top of mind and I can try to start using them more.
Mhm. Yeah, when I did this I did this like a month ago, actually, maybe more, because I was preparing for, like I said, we've been preparing Automation April for 6 months, and so I
Mm-hmm.
knew like a couple of months ago that like, okay, it's time that I sit down and I clean up my library, because I have a feeling that I may resurrect some shortcuts that I never actually used, and that's why you will see, folks will see, I will share 30 shortcuts on Mac Stories this month. So it's like a shortcut a day. Really, that's what I'm doing. Anyway, my structure for running shortcuts as a user. So we talked about like from the creator's standpoint.
Right.
But as a shortcuts user, I've changed this many times. And it changed with the arrival of shortcuts on macOS Monterey. When it came out, I fully embraced the menu bar at first, and then I stopped. So now the shortcuts item in the menu bar is actually one of the hidden icons in
Really?
Bartender.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You've gone farther. You've gone even further than me. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. I feel like once you get beyond about 10 or so in the menu bar, it's not super useful because it's just too long of a list.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't hidden it either.
Yeah, I do. I now do a few things. I realized, and this is partly your responsibility, John. I realized that I really prefer triggering shortcuts via Raycast or Launch Bar, similar utilities. But Raycast
Right.
is especially impressive because I like the simplicity of it. I love how fast it is. And I really like how easily I can give a hotkey to a shortcut, but also how I can mark certain shortcuts as favorites, so that when I open Raycast, I see them in the favorites list at the very top of the window. So that's really cool.
Here's something that is new for me, that I was assigning an awful lot of shortcuts to the Stream Deck at one point early in the year, and I have stopped in favor of Raycast 2. Part of that is that the plugins for the Stream Deck are not 100% reliable sometimes, and keyboard shortcuts don't always work. And so I find that Raycast is always rock solid, and that it always triggers my shortcuts. So I've been moving to that. The other part of it is that since I injured my knee and I'm recovering from knee surgery, I'm not always sitting at my desk as I usually am when I'm working. So I don't always have the Stream Deck. And with Raycast, I can be sitting on the couch or sitting in bed and very easily trigger my shortcuts. So I'm relying on the Stream Deck less. It's not that I've abandoned the Stream Deck. I still like having it a lot, especially for Obsidian, because there's just so many hotkeys that you can assign in Obsidian, and it works really well with the Stream Deck. But for shortcuts, I really want to have a system that's available to me and that's kind of I don't know, muscle memory, whether I'm sitting at my desk or sitting on the couch with my laptop.
Yeah, I understand that makes sense. So yeah, that's on the Mac side. That's why I kind of stopped using the menu bar, because it's just so much easier to just type the name of a shortcut. And I remember most of my shortcuts by name, and with fuzzy search, it's also very easy.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by SourceGraph. These days, every company needs to be a tech company because there's so much code to deal with. It's hard to have any kind of online presence or digital service without copious amounts of code. And code affects everyone. It's the foundation of the technology we rely on every single day. But handling big databases can be tricky, especially when you think about the volume and variety of code. So thankfully, SourceGraph is here to solve your company's code-related headaches. They're tackling big code. More than ever, companies need resources to increase developer velocity, to give people what they need to be agile, innovative, and productive. With SourceGraph, developers can figure out how to use a particular function, find and solve problems more quickly, identify what impact a code change will have on dependencies, and so much more. SourceGraph is the future of how companies are built, and it's powering the infrastructure of today's most successful, high-growth businesses, including 3 of the 5 biggest tech companies. SourceGraph's current customers include PayPal, Uber, Plaid, Reddit, Atlassian, and so many more. If your company uses code, you need SourceGraph. Go now to about.sourcegraph.com. Again, that's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why some of the biggest tech companies in the world use SourceGraph and to see what it can do for yours. Our thanks to SourceGraph for their support of the show.
Something else that I do, a 3-finger tap to show a folder of shortcuts with Better Touch Tool. This is something that you can do in Better Touch Tool. You can show
That's a good idea.
You can show a custom contextual menu on macOS that shows you a list of shortcuts from a specific folder by assigning any gesture to it. And in my case, I can 3-finger tap anywhere on screen, and I get a list of my shortcuts. So that's also
on your trackpad, you mean, not on screen. You're not tapping your Mac screen, Federico.
On my trackpad. You wouldn't believe how many times I try to touch macOS. Speaking of folders, this is something that I started doing a couple of years ago that I've refined over time. So I mostly organize my shortcuts by app, but by the type of integration it is. Meaning, I have a folder for Obsidian. I have a folder for Safari. I have a folder for music. I have one for photos. Whenever possible, I try to organize my shortcuts by the primary functionality that they serve. So if it's a shortcut that resizes images, that's a photos shortcut. Basically that kind of organization. I do have a Mac Stories and Club Mac Stories, 2 folders for those. Those are internal use only shortcuts. So things like internal utilities like our CDN, backups, dealing with Trello, assembling Mac Stories weekly, that kind of stuff goes into the Mac Stories and Club Mac Stories folders. I don't do shortcuts by project otherwise. I tried to do an iOS review shortcuts folder in years past. It never really stuck with me because then my brain keeps thinking, why can I not find this photos related shortcut in the photos folder? So, this is where I wish that I could really tag my shortcuts,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I know that you've also, we've talked about this before, having a tagging system in shortcuts will really help alleviate some of these concerns because, I want to store a shortcut in a folder, but I could also say this is for photos, but this is also for iOS review. This is also for, Calliope, for example. But this is not possible right now.
It would be great for things like widgets too, because then you could kind of designate which widgets are going to have your shortcuts.
Exactly. The most important thing I do in terms of running my shortcuts is having a top level. This is the most important folder I have in the Shortcuts app. It's called Core Shortcuts.
Okay.
And as the name implies, these are my most important essential shortcuts.
I tried this because I know you had told me about this and it didn't stick with me. I'm wondering what it is about these shortcuts that don't you end up having the same problem you would have with creating an iOS review folder where you how come? What are you doing with this folder? What's in there?
So these are the shortcuts that I use multiple times every single day. These are the shortcuts that I see on my iPhone home screen in the widget, that I see on the iPad in the widget, that I have marked as favorites in Raycast. These are the shortcuts that I use the most. There's On My Mind, which is my shortcut to save thoughts and ideas into Obsidian. There's my shortcut to open my dashboard note in Obsidian. There's my share menu shortcut, which is really the most important one I want to talk about in a minute. There's Apple Frames, there's MusicBot, there's Load Calendar Set, which takes me into a specific view in Fantastical. And there are some shortcuts that I haven't shared yet. I think that this will be part of my collection for April. Shortcuts to view my recent notes in Obsidian. That gives me a list of recently modified notes, which is very cool. There's a shortcut that opens my Elden Ring note in Obsidian. And there's a few other things that I still haven't announced. Share menu, though, is really a fundamental piece of this setup. Share Menu it started out as my share sheet replacement for shortcuts.
Right.
I wanted to have the old run workflow share sheet extension back, as opposed to the current system we have, where in the share sheet you get a bunch of individual shortcuts, and none of them are really differentiated because all of them have these monochrome icons. And I wanted to have color back in the share sheet. So that's why I put together Share Menu, the first version. It was a shortcut that allowed me to pick other shortcuts that I wanted to run from the share sheet in Safari, in Tweetbot, in other apps. And that was important to me because that list had colorful icons. And I really need to have the visual differentiation. But over time, Share Menu has become also something that I run not just from the share sheet, but also from the keyboard on my MacBook and from the widget on the iPhone and iPad, because it's now become this sort of hub that is smart, in that if I'm just running Share Menu manually, it asks me, do you want to share some text or pick a photo or pick a document? And then I can pass that item to a list of shortcuts, to a list of my favorite shortcuts. But I can also use Share Menu by doing things like on the MacBook, I can pass some text selected via PopClip to Share Menu. And in that case, Share Menu says, oh, I see that you passed some text. So now it's become this sort of like master shortcut that I run all the time to serve as a sort of like interface for all my other shortcuts. And it's like a central hub. And from there, imagine like the hub from Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Galaxy, like you're there and you can choose your levels. This shortcut is the equivalent of that. Like you start the shortcut and then you choose the path you want to take. You choose the shortcut you want to run. And this has been incredible for me.
Yeah, and it really explains, I think, why you've got your folders set up the way you do, because that makes a lot of sense with that kind of setup, I think, because you're going from I've got some text and maybe I want to send that to my text editor or something. It makes, I think that folder structure kind of fits really well with it. All right, Federico. Well, that's a good way to kick off Automation April. Be sure to check all the time on Mac Stories this week. We're going to have a lot of content there, but it's really going to be everywhere. And one thing that we have done that you should do is follow our new special Twitter account called Automation April, as well. That's one word. Automation April is where you're going to find out what the latest is that's going on, whether it's on Mac Stories, App Stories, the club, everywhere. Plus, we're going to be maybe providing some tips and other things for shortcuts right there on that particular Twitter feed. So check that out. We will be around a lot. Hit us up on Twitter. Say hello in the Discord. We're going to be doing a lot of shortcuts all month long, a lot of automation. So we're really looking forward to seeing what people create. So let us know about it. I also want to thank our three sponsors for this episode. That's Collide, Things, and SourceGraph. Federico and I are on Twitter and Instagram. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.